Everybody, C-Note here, and welcome to Dopamine, the show that is like a bright and sunny day. Good for you, and you should go enjoy it. Today, I wanted to talk about the inevitable crash that comes with having a mood disorder, something that I've been dealing with essentially for as long as I can remember. Since I was about 10 years old, I've had cyclothymia or some degree of depression. It was formerly known as manic depression, and within probably the last 2 years of, I saw a therapist for about a little over a year. She helped me define that what I'm really going through was more of a cyclothymia, which is more of a triggered or mood cycle that was kind of based on my environment, that there's sensitivity to my environment, things like that. So without further ado, I'm going to play the intro, and then we can talk about it. Let's go.
Drums, please.
North, west, south side, right, yeah. Now here it is.
Okay. Hi. Welcome. I'm glad you're here. Pretty excited. I'm excited because I usually don't catch myself in this mode, and it's nice to be able to talk about it. So I'm kind of in this place where I feel like I'm at the top, where I'm at the peak of kind of my productivity and feeling good and all of that stuff. But I've got this kind of anxiety, this feeling that the crash is coming. And in one sense, I don't necessarily want to manifest it by, having the fear of it and then making it happen. I want to be more preventative. So what I end up doing when I'm trying to prevent myself from hitting a crash is to not overwhelm myself. Essentially what happens, and for those who are not familiar with cyclothymia, it is a disorder that will allow yourself to kind of get into a place where you're overreaching, you're doing too much, you're giving yourself a little bit too much going on, and you start making too many plans. You start to feel like you can take on the world. And cyclothymia inherently, actually, I was just talking about mania, but cyclothymia is a mood disorder that is cyclical in nature. You can kind of think of a menstruation cycle in a way, but it's not predictable. It's something that, the cycle kind of goes round and round. So up here is mania, you've got some stability, and then you've got kind of a depressive state, and then you're stable again, and then you kind of go back up to mania, and it kind of goes like that. It's a little bit more of a crash when it goes from mania to depression, so it's probably more like a D, which is kind of funny that I chose dopamine as the title, because it is more of like a D, where it's just up and then crash, and then you're back up to normal again. So it's like that. The cycle is unpredictable. It's not something that I know. I've gotten better at learning when it's coming, when things are changing, and how to get myself out of certain modes and into different kinds of modes. And essentially, I'm working towards continuing to learn that, continuing to listen to myself, and know when things are getting better or getting worse. So I'm still live on Facebook, by the way. So if you're watching live, or if you're not watching live but listening to it on the podcast, you can go to facebook.com/dopamine podcast, and you can listen to the live musings of me doing this. I basically produce the show live, and then I upload it as a podcast. Apologize if the chirping's too loud. It's nice that spring is coming and we get some lovely chirping outside the window. It's really nice. So again, to kind of go back into the cyclothymia talk, it's something that I've been dealing with since I was a kid. It's had effects on my life throughout my life. It's made it difficult to maintain relationships, to have a job, especially when you're supposed to kind of live within someone else's schedule and go wake up 9 o'clock in the morning, or wake up at 7 rather, and to get to work at 9 and live within a corporate environment and deal with a lot of emotional situations with people. I've never been inherently good at emotions, not even good at tuning to mine many of the times. So I'm, it's been an active learning process and dealing with all sorts of different things going on in life. So like the set path in life has never been something that's been easy for me or good for me. I've had to kind of learn more about who I am and kind of mold my life around that for the most part. Where's Sonic the Hedgehog? He's not around. As you can see, I'm a little distracted. You know what? Sonic is not here, so we're going to grab another friend of ours, Ray. Ray is... Oh, God. What is going on? This is a madness. Come on, Ray. You could do this. We're in this. We're in this together. Very distractible these days. She's a little top heavy. It's not going to work. Stay. Okay. Good. Anyway, so I just have to like not move the table too much. So that's a little something for those of you watching. I tend to put like a Funko Pop on my laptop. It makes it a little bit more fun, I guess. So to go back to what I was talking about before I got distracted, and that's kind of part of the mania, is like I'm easily distractible. I kind of gather a whole bunch of things. I'm like all over the place, and it's a little bit hard to focus. But being aware of that allows me to kind of rein it in a little bit. So I've had issues with that with work. There are times where maybe I'll get inappropriate, or in terms of like the jokes that I'll say that aren't, okay with a corporate environment. There might be situations where I'm just taking on too much work and people are throwing things at me and I'm like, yeah, I could do it. And then I can't, and I crash and I go into a depressive spiral. And then I don't want to show up to work for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, up to 3 months. Really, I felt the cycle last for up to 3 months in different ways. I could be depressive for 3 months or manic for 3 months. And the difference between normal and manic is kind of important to state as well. Normal feels pretty even. When people are taking medical meds for bipolar or any kind of mental health, it's really about stabilizing. It's not about getting you high, because being in mania kind of feels like being high. It feels like you're on E or something, where you're just like, you're feeling a little bit more like promiscuous, maybe a little bit more like sexually heightened, which is a weird thing to say publicly, but sometimes that happens. You could be a little bit more aggressive towards people, sometimes irritable, tend to be more productive, tend to feel like you can take on the world a little bit more, and you just kind of like start signing checks that you can't cash in a way. For me, it's manifested in like doing too much shopping, spending too much money, making emotional justifications for spending certain types of money on certain things. And it doesn't feel very good. It doesn't feel good to do that. So I'm not a fan of getting to this place. So I do fear the inevitable crash. I worry about it all the time. I worry about, because it does, being in mania feels good. But when you don't have a place to put your energy, it feels like restlessness. It feels like you're pushing forward on a treadmill, but not going anywhere. And you're starting to like stumble over your own feet, essentially. So it's kind of a scary feeling after a while, because you feel like you have to keep going and you just can't. You feel physically exhausted, mentally exhausted, and you just want everything to stop. But you've put things in motion that you can't just make stop. So for me, it's important to, when I start to pull things into my world that are creating more commitments for myself, I need to consider how I can still do these things while I'm in a depressive or crashed state. So I start to think about, I just created a group for this page, and I have to think about, apologize for the burping. I have to start thinking about how I can still do things somewhat seamlessly without, what is the minimum viable product, the MVP, for those of you who have had traditional marketing training. I have not. But you want to think about your minimum viable product being something that is still executable day by day, something that you can do that isn't a detriment to your mental health, is something that you could do easily, which is why I've put so much emphasis on getting this video aspect of dopamine down, because it's helping my process with podcasting. It's helping my process with reaching more people via Facebook Live, and I can put it on YouTube. So I'm essentially using the same amount of effort to create this as I would to take time to shoot somewhere else, to put it into Premiere, to create the file system, to gather the music, to do all of the color grading, all of the editing, and things like that, and then render for a few hours. All of this is essentially happening in real time. It's saving me a ton of time. I've got a system where I turn on Camera Live, I turn on the camera, I connect to Facebook, I start the stream on OBS, and then I start the stream on Facebook, and I'm good to go. And for the most part, when I do these podcasts, I'm doing it like in this format anyway. I'm kind of just thinking of things off the top of my head. I rarely restart, because the point is to be real and be authentic with you. So that's totally part of it. So right now, I'm in the state where I'm doing a lot of things, but it's also in service of preparing for the crash, because there are a lot of times where I feel like I'm good, I'm healed, I'm better, and then I get the crash, and then I'm surprised by it, and then that's where the feelings of worthlessness and not wanting to get out of bed come from. Another way to describe mania is repression, and repression is a way of basically ignoring the problems in your life. Mania is such a feel-good thing. It is mixed with some irritability and some anger stuff, but for the most part, it's such a feel-good, like high-energy thing that you start to ignore the problems in life, and then eventually there's something in you that forces you to have to face your problems, something in your brain that forces you to have to deal with your problems. And when it catches up, or when something externally makes life catch up to you, it's almost like you're hit with the problem as if you've never faced it before. For in my example, I have right now the thing that I don't want to say ignoring, but is kind of lower on my list, is having to deal with the child support stuff. I've got the paperwork around here and I've got to deal with it, and it's actively on my brain. But if I'm not handling it, not taking care of it, not pushing towards handling the real life stuff, and if I'm just ignoring it, it's going to catch up to me. Whether it's in a real life practical way, with like the police knocking on my door or something, or if it's in an emotional way where I'm hit with the realization that I'm not handling my responsibilities, and this is something that it has an emotional weight. It's the emotional version of the police knocking at the door, basically. So that's something I need to handle soon. It's been tricky because, again, financial situations have been tricky, so I've been trying to figure all that stuff out. So it's not that I've ignored it, but it's an active part of my process, and for me, it takes me time to work through things and figure out the best course of action. But the important distinction is making sure that you're, I've touched on this on a previous episode called Repression versus Positivity, where repressing your ideas, repressing your problems is not solving them. And, being truly positive is allowing yourself to be positive when you're stable, whereas repressing things is false positivity. Basically, you're pretending everything's okay, and it's not, and it's gonna catch up to you. And that mania, that inevitable crash, is kind of what comes from that. So when I start to feel that anxiety, when I start to feel like I'm doing too much, I need to start taking stock in what it is that I need to get done. Is there anything that I'm ignoring? Is there anything emotionally that I need to take care of that I'm not? So that's where I'm at with that. I need to take stock in where I am, which I think is important for anyone. We need to make emotional take emotional stock in where we are, pretty much consistently every day. I try to do it every day and see how that fits in our logical framework. For me, I'm more of a logic-based person, more of a technical person, I should say. I gotta stop using the word logic because logic can be emotional, and it's tricky, So for me right now, I have a fear of that crash. I don't know what that's gonna look like. Sometimes that just makes me difficult to deal with. Sometimes I start being more irritable to people. Sometimes I don't want to get out of bed, and suicidal thoughts do come in that case. So when I am in this manic state, I don't take the amount of work I'm doing for granted. I try to not push myself to a place that's gonna make me crash so hard that it's gonna feel terrible. But I also need to be careful that the depressive part of it that comes as a result of the crash is not something that's going to end me. That's a very real thing that I feel I'm facing, is that I take every day seriously. I take every day as something that I want to think about. What stamp on the world am I making today? What stamp on my personal relationships am I making today? Because I have a very real fear that I could have a terrible day tomorrow that makes me feel like a completely different person, and I do something that ends it, and it's a very real fear, and it's reality, and it's something we need to talk about more, and it's something I want to share with you guys more as I continue to move forward in life. So, I'm not currently, the tricky part about this too is that my version of suicidal is different than someone else's, and it's probably something I should dedicate a specific episode to, because I haven't really talked about suicide or the idea of it, or how it manifests differently for some people. Generally, my version of it often comes in mania. That, like, my depression doesn't drive the suicidal thoughts so much. I do have suicidal thoughts in depression, but I feel less likely to commit any actions in depression, whereas mania has always been more dangerous for me. Mania has led to more serious situations where I've done more self-destructive behavior. I've would binge drink, or there have been a couple times where I've almost walked in front of a bus and a friend had to stop me. Stuff like that. So I do want to dedicate an episode to that, so I can share some of my stories and how kind of rehashing those stories has helped me in my future, and realizing that mania is something that I need to be cautious of as well. And this feeling is familiar to me. I've taken stock in it. I know when it's coming, and I know how it feels. So the best thing I can do, and the best thing I can offer you if you're someone that's dealing with cyclothymia or some form of a disorder, mood disorder, is to stop, to talk to someone, to take a moment, to breathe, to maybe meditate if that's your thing, play a game, watch baseball, make yourself a meal. Make sure that you're taking care of yourself, even if you have to literally write it on a list to take care of yourself, that's something that you should do as well. So I feel like I'm starting to overreach a little bit, because I've got this show that I'm trying to do every day. I've got the Facebook page. I've got the Facebook group where I'm getting a lot more notifications. It's very overwhelming. I'm trying to create more content for that. And then I've also got clients that I need to appease. I've got an event that I'm working on for a friend, that I'm helping design her stuff for her. I'm also helping I'm also helping two clients with social media stuff, and then I've got a former employer that has contracted me for some video editing and stuff like that too. So I've got things I got to do, but know that taking 10 minutes to take stock in yourself, to breathe, to take a moment, especially when you're mode switching, especially between projects. For me, everything's kind of meshing, and that's becoming a problem. I like to keep things a little bit more separate so that I can focus one thing at a time. And when things kind of get messy, that's when I start to lose focus, when I start to feel overwhelmed, and I feel like things are falling apart. So, yeah, that's the gist of it. That's what it feels like to be in mania. That's what it feels like to be kind of like on the teetering edge of what's going on right now. So I'm a little worried that I'm going to fall back into depression and crash, but I'm just going to kind of slow things down. I've got a couple things that I'm doing today, but after this, I'm going to take a break. I'm going to eat some lunch, drink some water, make some tea so I can push myself through the afternoon. And then, I'll be back and doing more things. So if you're listening on Facebook, please leave a comment and let me know if you're someone who's dealt with a mood disorder or know someone who has or dealt with any kind of anxiety. I think it would be interesting to share your story. And if you have any questions about anything that I've talked about, please share that as well via Anchor or Facebook or on YouTube. And let me know where you're at and what you're thinking. So without further ado, hi, my name is Christian.com. Go there, check out my personal stuff. Dopamine.life is where you can subscribe to the show, the audio version. We are on YouTube and on Facebook.com/Dopamine Podcast. Also, Dopamine Podcast on Instagram and Dopamine Show on Twitter. And please gently caress the like button and subscribe wherever you are. And let me know what you think of the show. Leave a review on our Facebook page. And I think that's it. I have to automate an outro for the video version so that I can remember what to say at this part. But I appreciate your time. I hope you guys are doing well. Take care of yourself and each other, and I'll catch you next time. See ya.